if you're growing your own apples, you have a pretty good idea of what kind you're growing and what you're going to do with them. However, the world is becoming a smaller place, and we're beginning to see apple varieties that some of us may not be familiar with. What I'd like to do today is look at some of the different varieties that are available in the market and talk a little bit about what we can do with some of those. The first one that I have for you to look at is one that I think most people will be familiar with. It's the good old Red Delicious. It's a good eating apple, however, it's very high in sugar content and it doesn't hold up well for cooking. If you use this one in a pie, it's going to be way too sweet with the normal amount of sugar that we're going to use. They're great for eating out of hand. The next one is a Golden Delicious, which is sort of in between the two extremes of being a cooking apple versus a straight eating apple. It works real well for cooking. It will hold its shape fairly well, but it does have a little bit higher sugar content than some of the other varieties do, so that many of us will choose to use this one primarily as an eating apple. One of the other things that we tend to find is that depending on the color, that may give you a clue as to what you want to use the apple for. Green apples and yellow apples are almost always ones that can be used in cooking, whereas red apples, that's not as easily determined. We find red apples that are definitely for eating out of hand and red apples that are definitely just for cooking. The next one that I have for you to look at is a Macintosh. Now, Macintosh were very popular up into the last few years. Macintosh is one of those apples that was benefiting from the use of LR. It did do a lot of good things for them. We're finding them falling in favor and falling in production because the LR is no longer in use, and without that chemical we do find less production of this particular one. Most of the other ones we've not had that problem with. We have been able to either do without the types of chemicals that were used or find a substitute one to take the place of what LR was doing for us. This one is a Granny Smith, and they're increasing in popularity. Again, it's a green apple, so that's a clue that it's going to be good for cooking. However, it also is good for eating out of hand and good for baking and so on. This one is increasing in production in California, so we're finding that the price on this one may be going down. They're originally primarily imported from New Zealand. The next one is a Rome Beauty. Again, a traditional baking apple and cooking apple. It holds up very well in cooking. It's got a real nice shape. And for those kinds of things. The next one is a Jonathan, very popular in this part of the country and in the Midwest, very juicy in the fall, primarily is when you will find them in production. They don't hold up through the winter months. The juiciness tends to turn into mealy, so that if you're going to enjoy this particular kind of apple, it would be a good time to do it at this point. These are also very good for home canning and for applesauce. The next one is also an import. This is a Gala. Notice that it's sort of a yellow-orange underneath the red, so it's not the traditional red apple that many of us are familiar with. This one is also very often import. Again, New Zealand is a good producer of these, and as a result of that, we find that the cost on these can be pretty steep. 6 apples may cost you $2.50 to $3, so that it's more expensive, but they do have a sweet aromatic taste. They're real good for eating out of hand, taking in lunches, and so on. Many of us preserve apples over the wintertime, applesauce, cinnamon apple rings. We do have some familiar information in a new form. If you want to contact your county extension office, you can pick up a copy of this brochure. It's called Let's Preserve Apples. We'll talk about preserving whole apples, canning them, freezing them, as well as doing some of the specialty products. For Oklahoma Gardening, this is Barbara Brown.
We hope you enjoyed this video. It's part of our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel. You can also find more recent videos on our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. And join us on social media for great gardening tips, photos, and discussion.